Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. We are excited to hear about NAV Did You Know, presented today by Innovia Consulting's John Grant. John has been with Innovia for 9 years. He's had 25 plus years working with companies focusing on MFG and planning and costing with ERP software. He has a lot of background in NAV, so get your questions ready and you can ask him toward the end of the presentation. And we just have a couple of things to let you know about before we get started. First, like I said, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the question box and we will get them called out and answered for you. And second, we do record this in all of the webinars. If you want to review the recording or have someone else in your organization see it, you can find it later this afternoon at innovia.com. And now, without further ado, John, you are all set.
Okay, thanks. And that little slide in the front is, let me just reduce something here and then I can, thanks Angie. And you don't have to read the rest of that. So I'm gonna get started right away. This is just gonna be different topics and feel free to ask questions. Hopefully you'll pick up one or two things from this that you might be able to use in your day-to-day. So I'm going to go to a little bit about Innovia if you're not familiar with us. You know, we've been in business 30 plus years, and some of the locations we're pretty much in the Midwest, and if you don't know who we are. So what I'm going to attempt to go through in a rapid session, but actually everybody can ask questions, are some of these topics. Some of the things I've seen that are in NAV that customers are not necessarily leveraging to help manage their data. So we'll go through, these are the topics we'll go through, and I'll wrap up with some e-learning and NAV resources that can help you, as well as I'm a big fan of Navig to leverage that resource. So I'm going to start off with some simple things, just navigation things. One of them is ability to, in 2015 and later, to have multiple sorts on your list views. And that's simply by holding the Shift key down and selecting another column. And I'll show that a little bit. We'll just go through that. Also, the same way is the advanced filters. Saving that sort view is an example, and I think most customers are doing this, but if you aren't, it's a quick way to have some good data. And the last part of this is just how the advanced filter works and saving that filter. So I'm going to show you that in a customer list view. So let me get that up. So I'm going to go to a customer list view, and we'll see if we can show the, oops, not the contacts. I want to do the customers, hang on. The customers, okay, so if I look at my customer list, I might sort this by location. So now, you know, it's top to bottom, and I could reverse sort it if I wanted to, but we'll keep it at this. And then I want it alphabetically within location. I want to have a list. So if I hold the Shift key down and click on that, I now have an alphabetical list. And if I go back to, if I save this, as everyone should realize, you can save view, and I could name it, and now have it on my, over here. So if I look at, I'm going to close out of this, I'm going to go like to sales. But if I go to my customers on my list here, let's see if I got that. Let's see, where are we at here? Where did my customers go? Let's see. Okay, let me do that. I'll have to save that list view. So I'm going to save that list view. So I'm going to go back to my customers, and I'm going to sort by location, and then I'm going to sort by name. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to call it location name, and do an OK. And if I go to my home page, I have a customer here, and location name pulls me right into that list view that I saved. So more or less showing that you can sort by multiple columns in 2015 or later. So hopefully that is a feature that you might spread to your users. Nice feature. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to flip to another slide that I'm not going to necessarily show this, but hopefully you're leveraging in the customize this page and some of the advanced show required fields. You have this quick entry available. So I'm on customize fast tabs, general. It shows me all my columns and the status is along here. And this quick entry is the feature that allows you to move. When you hit enter, it'll jump to the field that is the next quick entry field. This should be used particularly on entering purchase orders and sales orders to save users time. This is also the area where you can rearrange the fields in the sequence you'd like to see, and also promote or put fields in additional, show additional data or not. And oftentimes we see this as forgotten. You know, the implementation, you get to a new version, you realize you can do this, but it gets lost in the shuffle to get live, and you users are. It's a good thing to go back with your user group and review, is everybody using this functionality. So hopefully you are. It can save. I've seen some studies where if you can save users, you know, I don't know, 3-4 minutes of purchase order or sales order, that's real time that they gain, and that's another feature that I think is underutilized, because typically when we go on site after somebody's been running or they are existing user and they're having us review their system, oftentimes this part of it is not leveraged as well as, you know, the what's on your ribbon and homepage, and those are all things that you as a user can control. So that's all good stuff and time savers. So I'm going to skip ahead now. One of the things that is underutilized, I feel, and potentially could be of use, is on your role center, you have what I call, you list your vendors and parts that you might use or customers. So I'm going to show you a little piece that can help you leverage that a little more. So I'm going to go back to NAV, and I'm going to go to my home page, and we'll kind of walk through this. So and we'll focus on my customers. So I have, as let's say I'm a CSR, I'm entering orders. I put my active customers down here. You know, in your customer file, you probably have, you know, you got many hundreds of customers, or in your business, you might have multiple customers, but only as I'm responsible for, let's say, a group of customers. So I list them in this section on the home page. Now I can drill to them, and I can, from here, go into the customer and look at their open orders and that kind of thing too. But I can also use, the system will remember what's in my customers when I go to look at data. So I'm going to go to my open orders. And here I have all the orders in the system. But I'm going to do a filter by the sell to customer, and I'm going to put in my cheat note % my CUST, which is going to look at my homepage and use that as what customers I want to view. So when I entered, if you notice now, by customer, I'll sort this, I'll reverse sort it. So I have customer 30,000, 20,000, let's go the other way. I have customer, this customer 10,000. I've only got in my sales orders the customers from my homepage. And that list, if I go back to my homepage, I can manage to, because down here, if I've got another customer, I just add them here. I don't have to go back to the list view and filter. And think about what we could do there is I could, on the sales orders, if I go to, let's see, go to my sales orders again, I can have my percent my customers, and then I could save the view, and every time I go into my sales orders, I could select that saved view, and it would just show me the orders that are my customers that I'm responsible for. Similarly, the commands or the cheat sheet works with my vendors and my items. The only caveat is you have to be in the advanced filter window. But if you create that and then you save it, it will always look at your home page to understand what do I want to populate. So that could be pretty powerful if I set my home page up correctly with I'm responsible for 25 different customers. I create on my open orders, I create a view sorted by customer, filtered by my percent my customer, but then sort it and then save it. That's a pretty interesting little hidden feature that NAV has. So hopefully that's one you can use, leverage more with your users. So any questions on that? How that is used? And that's probably one of the few uses, because I tend to see people on their homepage not necessarily populate some of these areas because they're not sure what, why would I use that? I'm going to go look at open orders or whatever. But while this, the queues up here are open sales orders and ready to ship and partials. It's not just for my customers. If I'm and if I'm a sales rep, I definitely want my customers loaded in here, and I can have a quick way to use that percent my customers on different lists and views of invoices, save a view, all those kind of things. So hopefully you feel that's a good feature that is kind of hidden in NAV. So no questions on that. We'll keep going here. Okay. Another feature that I feel is underutilized is on the home page. And I'm going to go back to my home page again. And there's this area called Report Inbox. And most users, it's going to be empty, and they may even hide that for all, because they don't see a use for it. But the use for it is in the I think it's 2015 or later. When you go to process a report, you have the option to schedule it. In addition to preview, print, PDF, etc., you can schedule it. And let's say I run I don't know, an aging report. I can schedule it to run at 10 o'clock tonight, and it will populate my homepage with the report that it's finished. And if I click on it, it will go to it. So let's see if we can show you that. So in here I have let's see if we can get this to run. Oh, that's a close. Okay, but that's some notifications. If I go to this and I say open, it ran at night. It didn't tie up my system. So if I'm doing a report that I can more or less wait for, it'll run in the background. Now I could launch it to say right now it's I don't know 10:15 Central Time. I could say launch it, and I want it to run at 10:30, and then I could come back and look at it, and that would work fine. Because when I can open it from here, and now it's going into the PDF that was created. So I'm doing okay here. Let's see if it pulls it up. So now I've got that report that didn't tie up my system, but I was able to run it in the background. So again, another use for that home page that I don't see a lot of customers using, but again, it helps offload, frees on my, like if I run something, I might fire it up and then do something else, and then when I go back here, it's all good. So pretty straightforward, and I think it is 2015 or later. So anybody have any questions on that? Again, underutilized, but a nice function to allow you to run a report that may run a while, kind of offline, but yet the system notifies you when it's done. And this is not a job. If you're familiar with, you can have set up jobs, queues, entries to run at night, but this would be user by user running it, and you could schedule it to run at 10:30, for instance, like I mentioned. Okay, so we'll keep going. Okay, so that's another, I feel, underutilized. Off the homepage again, there's lots of good functionality with that homepage embedded into the software, but I don't feel that's leveraged enough with a lot of users. So, okay, we'll keep going here. Okay, I'm going to jump around, but I wanted to talk about the bill of material. So hopefully some of you out there are using manufacturing. I've got a bunch of tips on manufacturing that I'll go through. So this is a bill of material, sample bill of material, and a key piece of this is unit and measure of the, like a bicycle here, for instance. It's in inches or pieces, and of course the bill of material represents how many pieces I need per how many of these I need per piece. Now, a great example of this is if you're a recipe or a process industry, you might have a unit of measure that is a batch. So I'm making something, it's a batch, it's 100 pounds, it's 500 pounds, whatever it is, it's a batch, is a unit of measure. And these quantities represent how many I use in a batch. And this is just in a bill of material, it's not on the production order yet or anything. It allows you to create a recipe that the production order will use and do the math and figure it out for you. And that's an easy way, a visual thing for who's ever responsible for the bill of material to have, oh, here's our recipe. Yep, that looks right. And then you use it in production. Another use for it is an opportunity to work with a precious metal business, and 5 decimal points, the quantity per was not precise enough. Default NAV is 5 decimals. They wanted, I believe it was 8 decimals, because of course gold and silver is expensive. So rather than modifying NAV, we set up a unit of measure in the bill, I believe it was per 100 or per 1,000. So the bill of material components were all per 100 or 1,000. So basically, if you think about it, it shifted the decimal point over to the left to And so we enter is all entered. But when you create the production order, it does the math, and we actually were able to handle additional decimal points in NAV without a modification. Any questions on that? So again, while it seems like a simple thing, the unit and measure code on the bill of material can be used in process logically, but it also can be used if your business requires additional decimal precision on small run quantity items. You might be making this was electrical component, so they're tiny. The quantity of items might be 0.00123 or whatever, and they needed more than that, and that worked fine. So hopefully that's a little tip that makes sense to you. Unit and measure code, bill of material header can be very functional to, I'll say, to eliminate modifications. I'm not going to, the part up here is I just want to talk about that. Okay. So if we go to, let's see, another key piece that you should be using, and again, this affects production, is something called a routing link code. Think of it as when do I issue material? This particularly comes into play if you have production orders that run either large quantities, or they run over shifts or over days. And this allows you a couple things. So let's say I'm the planner and purchasing. I've got a production order that runs for, we'll go extreme, let's say it takes a week. And the front materials I need before we start the production order, but the end materials I don't need until we're towards the end of the work. So I might be capital equipment, I might be assembling something, I need 25 different items before we can start, but another 15 are at the end. Routing link code allows you to provide purchasing with good dates, because I don't want to buy all the material and have it in-house ahead of time. That's tying up my cash and this and that. And one of the ways to do that in NAV is to use this routing link code. So the routings, you identify a user-defined routing link code number. In this example, there's 100 and 300. And then in the bill of material, I can say which route step these are attached to. So think about if I do this, in this example, like these items are attached to 100 or 300, if I create my production order and it's scheduled, operation 40 might be due next Friday, but operation 10 to start the job, I might have to do it on Monday, or let's say operation 40 is 2 weeks out, and this is starting the first day of the production order. I don't need all that material in-house day one, but I do want planning to know about it. And if I attach this material to 300, it's going to do the lead time calculations and all that good stuff to let me know when I need to order it. Now, if you're using routing link codes at individual operations, to trigger consumption, you have to report something at that operation. Here's an example: is I'm working with a recipe. So again, my bill of materials was a batch size, and my production order, I've got my recipe. I have a 100-pound recipe, but the output varies. You maybe get 98 pounds, or maybe get 95. It's not directly linked to my recipe for 100 pounds. So in my production order, I would attach the material to the first operation step, and one way to do that is to forward flush material. So as soon as I record any time on that first operation, 500 pounds of material will be issued to that order. I'm not basing it on the output. Hopefully it makes sense to you how that, because a normal production order that doesn't run span, let's say you have a production order that runs 2 hours, you could attach all your material to the last operation and say it's backflush. So when I post output on the last operation, it will consume material as we report output. So just recapping, routing link code allows me to consume material at a specific step, also plan material at that step if it's a order that is on the floor for a week or more. When I report, it's going to push material into work in process on that order. And I can backward or forward flush that material depending on my process. So routing link code is very powerful to help you relieve inventory for the components automatically. Because if I set my items up as backflush but do not attach them to an operation, it only issues the material when I finish the production order. And I do have companies that do that, but at month end it's a mad dash to try and estimate what material was consumed to move to WIP, and it's just not a great way to do it. But I think it was brought forward from a previous implementation, and we're working on that. So any questions on a routing link code? Okay, so we'll keep going. Another kind of a hidden feature that users are not aware of is setting up your routings. There's a field on the operation called lot size. This is not, you're probably familiar with on the item card, there's a lot size, but that is used for the standard cost roll-up, pretty much to spread your setup time across a standard lot size. This field is on the operation itself, unrelated to the lot size on the item card. And if you think of it, in this example, the run times, these work centers in the test company at Kronos, I also like how they set them up, but is in minutes. I prefer hours, but they're minutes. So I'm saying in 1 hour, I can do 200 of these operations. In 1 hour, I can do 500. In 1 hour, I can do 185. This allows me to have a very visual look at the routing to say, how did you come up with that standard? Because when you're taking your routings and of course the typical, or what I've seen is, well, you take and you figure out I can do 200, so I'm going to take 60 divided by 200, and that's how many I can do a minute. So my runtime is 0.12356, 0.2, and it's pretty hard to give somebody on the production floor to say, hey, you need to run 0.125 a minute, or whatever the fraction is. You get what I mean? Where we often put this lot size on the production paper to say, here's your standard. You should be able to do 200 of these operations an hour, or 500, or 185. So it's not only a visual to someone looking at how do we come up with this standard, but it's also a visual that we can leverage on the production floor with a shop packet or on screen to give the worker, here's the pace you should be working at. Now the caveat with this is it's not exposed. If you do show columns, typically it is not showing, so you just need to have to add it to the fields that you can list and then expose it, and it's a pretty straightforward way to set up your routings. So hopefully everybody's good with that. Hidden feature, when the production order is created, it does the math for you, and everything is good. Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, on this one, hopefully some of you out there are running assembly orders, and I'm going to show this one because this is an interesting one. So I'm going to go look at an assembly order, because typically if you don't have any, you're trying to figure out what's the due date. So I'm going to go and look at an assembly order. So we'll let's see. I'm going to find my. Let's see where I'm going to go to departments, and we'll go to assemblies, and let's see. Where am I at? I'm going to look at. I've got an assembly order out here. Here's an assembly order. Okay. Okay. This assembly order has a due date of 12/20. That's when it's due. Because we have a 4-week lead time on this. Let's say we have an assembly order where we have a casting or something that we need to order. So I've got on this item, let's go take a look at the item. Okay, let's get down here. I have a 4-week lead time. So if I don't have any, typically it takes about 4 weeks to get all the material in here. I mean, that's what you have to run with, because otherwise, as you know, they use assembly orders, it'll say, oh, today, that's the due date, because I don't have any lead time. And that, you start using the lead time on the assembly order to get some organization to purchase parts and this and that I need to get in here in order to do it. So let's say you go with 4 weeks. Okay, so let's go back to the, I'm gonna cancel this and we'll go back to the order. Of interest, it takes 4 weeks, so my ending date is, or the due date is out 4 weeks. But if you notice, I don't want all my material in here 4 weeks ahead of time, correct? If you don't do what I'll show you, the system's going to tell you I need all this material in here on the start date of this assembly order, because it's got that 4-week buffer in. But I don't. I need the material in here when we're going to start the assembly order. And if you notice, I've got in here, and I'll show you how to do this. I need my material 1 day before the due date, because we put it together in 1 day, for instance. And your process may be different. What I'm getting at is, as you know, you can add resources to assembly orders, but it does not use resources to schedule. It uses the lead time. Everybody good with that? So how did we get this to say 11/19 instead of 11/22, or 12/19 instead of 11/22? And that is simply using what's available in NAV versus a mod. So I'll show you this item and what you do on the assembly. So we'll go to this guy. And we're going to edit this guy. Well, I probably could have done it from there anyway. So I'm going to navigate, and we're going to go to the assembly BOM. And there's a field called lead time offset, which, most customers are not using, but in this case for assembly orders, to me, it makes perfect sense. If this assembly order can be done in 1 day, but it's typically a 4-week lead time on it, I don't want all my material telling me I need it like the first of the month, we're not going to do it till the end. So this lead time offset can be plus or minus. So in this case, we set it up, and we have a customer doing this to say, I need that material 1 day before we're going to assemble it, much like a production order. So when I run planning for the purchase parts, that's the date it uses. It doesn't use the first day of the 4-week lead time. No modification, it's just the way it's set up. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on that? Small thing to do, but it does the timing on when I need the material correctly. Out of the box, all good stuff. Okay. Okay. I'm going to jump now from assembly orders. We're just kind of jumping around here, but requisition and planning worksheets, hopefully everybody is using or thinking about using, and you've all seen the planning parameters on the item card. It's also on a stock keeping unit, but let's talk about the item card. If you have one location, the item card, you set it up so to point at the item planning parameters. And this is all, you sometimes have to crawl to get the planning. I'd recommend pick a test group of items that move a lot and set it up and start understanding the reorder policies that are available and how these different fields interact. This is a fixed reorder, which I tend to say is for C-level items, low cost. If you have too many, not a big deal. In this example, I've said, okay, this is kind of a min-max, sorta. Fixed reorder is kind of like that. When I equal 100 or less, the system will push a record into the requisition worksheet, for instance. Of interest, this reorder point was adjusted in, I think it was 2015. It used to be less than in older versions, but they moved to the Apex standard of equal to or less than. So sometimes in your migrations, if you're on older version, 2009 or I think it's 13 even, when you migrate the reorder points, oftentimes you have to subtract 1 from it. So file that away, because I've had planners get the upgrade and they're running it, and it's telling them, like this example, the old system would be, it had to be less than 100, but now if it was 100, it would tell them to reorder. But this example of if it's 100 or less, tell me to reorder 100. This reorder quantity is usually equal to or greater than the reorder point. And then, of course, you've got multiples. This whole screen is one of those areas where a lot of tribal knowledge in the purchasing, and you just keep pushing to get it in the system. So I'm going to go ahead. Okay, another feature that is underutilized, it's an interesting one, is if I'm the planner, I'm working with requisition worksheets, and sales came in and told me to order something, and I don't really have a demand for it yet. There's no independent demand. I run a requisition worksheet, and it's going to tell me to cancel a PO that I just put in yesterday. One way to work around that, no modification, is there's a field called planning flexibility. You could change that to none, so planning will not tell you to delete it or change quantity or change dates. So that's a field. You have to work with it though, because you don't want to do that everywhere. Let's see, I think I got another. Oh, let me go back to this. In production, oftentimes if you've got a process, I'm processing firm planned orders and I'm scheduling today's Thursday, I'm scheduling Monday. When I release those, I might mark them as planning flexibility none, because we are going to run those on Monday. So it might be release production orders, planning flexibility is none, everything else is unlimited. So both purchasing and production have that capability. Okay. I'm going to flip to this, the refresh production orders. Hopefully you know this, but just a reminder, this is critical, these 3 boxes. Typically when I refresh, these 3 are all marked. It creates a new production order, goes out to the item card, gets the bill and the route. If I've got an alternate bill and route on my item itself on a production order, I would unmark lines because I don't want it to go to the item card. Use the routing and bill of material on the item itself on a production order. And then a third option is if I've customized or tweaked the routing and the bill on the production order itself, I would unmark both of these if I'm just rescheduling it. So as a planner, you need to understand what these fields do. You don't need modifications to do any of that. It's right out of the box. Another thing is if your process supports a 1-step production order, you don't have to post output before you finish it. So I'm going to do this. I'll show you this one, underutilized. So if I'm going to go, let's see, I got to find production. So I'm going to go to my release production orders. And let's see, where am I at here? So if I go to my release production orders, I've got a production order 10-10-34. Let's just take a look at it. So I'm making a whopping 1 of these. I just created the production order, refreshed it, pulled in the bill and route. Here's what my components look like. They're all back flushed, fine. Here's what my routing looks like. This is the difference here. The last operation, work center is back. I'm going to back flush all my labor. All I have to do, again, I'm making 1. I'm not going to post output. I'm not going to do a production journal. I am just going to change status to finished. Oh, hang on. Let me look here once. Let me just check one more time here. Make sure my is set up correctly. That looks right. That's all correct. Well, making a liar. I mean, but let me show you. If you finish it, it will just look like this. So I did 1 of these here. And it's simply, if I look at the entries, it back flushes all the components and it back flushed all the labor. So when I copied that, I must have a field in. I don't want to troubleshoot that now, but think of it as I create the production order. The last operation is back flushed. It will just, you just finish the status and you go. Okay. Hopefully you're using safety lead time. This is a default. This does an offset. I'll get here. When I schedule a production order, assembly order, or even a purchase order, the due date is offset by 2 days. And you can have this on individual items. And you can also use safety lead time on an item if you are, it needs to be inspected, for instance. You could have like a 7-day safety lead time on that one purchased item. Planning will say, here's when you got to order it. Here's the end date, and the due date will be like 7 days difference. So use that for that kind of items. And let's see, I'm running out of time here, but let me see what else I got here. Shipment date is the date that assembly orders use and production orders use. I think you know that probably. How do I affect that shipping date? On the customer card, you can put a shipping time, which will calculate, and also the company calendar will also take out Saturdays and Sundays. So that's all normal setup, no mods needed. The Requisition Planning Worksheet, I want to just talk about leverage the order tracking off the ribbon, run item availability by event. That will show you some good information. Let me just go here. I wanted to show you e-learning that's available on your customer source. So leverage that. I think it's a forgotten piece. We are seeing in our implementations more and more, I'll call it less training on like how the system works and more time spent on the process that will be used with NAV. In other words, we will have a sign to your team. Okay, we're going to have a session on, let's say, I don't know, let's say on job cost. Here's the video to view. Here's the questions we might have, and it's when we get together, then it's more going through how we're going to use NAV versus how does NAV work. And that seems to be the trend that we see more customers wanting. And then, of course, if you don't go through the e-learning, then the session might be delayed. Whole series of external resources. Hopefully, you're all members of NAVUG. Posted questions. The only thing I'll say on some of the posted questions, you have to kind of qualify the answers. And certainly it's not a forum to how do I implement something. It's more of a troubleshooting or asking good question is, what have others done? I'll pick on, like, we've got subcontractors who maintain our inventory. What kind of, how have customers handle that or partners handle that? That might be an example of a great use for that. Let's see how we doing on time. I wanted to leave some time for questions. So I'll throw it open for questions if anybody has any questions. I can go back and show you the requisition worksheet, troubleshooting a requisition worksheet here if we don't have questions. See if there's any that anybody had. So everybody's up to speed. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna show you the. Let's see. I want to go back to the managing the requisition worksheet. So I'm going to pull up and go through the requisition worksheet. And this applies also to the planning worksheet. So I'm going to go to my requisition worksheet. And let's see, 1850 was a good number. So I'm going to filter to this value, and I'm just trying to figure out 1850. Good information on the rec worksheet as well as the planes order tracking, of course. It actually, it goes out and says, oh, this line was generated because I have a sales order for 10 due. That's one way to look at it. If we look at item availability by event, this is another way to look at. Again, I'm the planner. I'm trying to figure out why do I need to order 10. I can also go to by event, and I'm not going to include planning. So what it does, it filters to the item. And if I expand this, it's showing me kind of a pegging report of on the 16th I need 10, on the 25th, et cetera, et cetera. And here's my location and quantities. I can include planning suggestions on top of this. So what did the rec worksheet just ask me about? So if I look here, here's a new purchase order it's suggesting to cover those 10. Here's another one to cover that. So that is another good way to troubleshoot. So again, item availability by event helps you get a, why is it telling me to order it? And then I wanted to show you that there's a timeline also, item availability timeline, probably underutilized. This will show you a timeline of that part. If I include planning, if I click on a line, it's showing me in the time phase where the I don't let's see, okay, where the demand is coming from, and it also shows me, if I can get this to work here. Here's the planned start date. I think this is the sales order. So this is a visual of that item, and this is pulling in all three of the planning lines at once here, versus I'm looking at one at a time here. So item availability is a good one. And then the other one that is helpful, there's a something called the planning availability report. Just put this item in, so I'm working with 1850. And if I preview this, test company's got a lot of data in, but think of it as, here's my beginning inventory, and here's a sales order, here's a recommended requisition worksheet, and it's keeping a projected balance by date. So this is one that also can help you in the requisition worksheet to understand if you've got issues or not. All out of the box, all available for the planner. So I think that's what I had. Let me get to, if nobody has any questions, and we won't have a quiz. I usually like to give a quiz when we're all done. So I'll ask you a question. So how do I prevent a purchase order from having a suggestion to move it, delete it, cancel it? Anybody take that one? Planning flexibility. So that's what I had. And feel free to, if you email with a question or something. So we kind of bounced around, but everything I showed you is out of the box NAV, and some of the functionality that often I see modifications are done for, which is not a good thing. So that's it, and I'll hand it back. I think that's good.
All right, John, thank you. And again, everyone, this is recorded, so it will be on our website later this afternoon for you to view. That's Innovia.com. And we would also like to invite you to our next webinar, which will be held next Wednesday, the 25th of October. And Innovia's Jeff Pergolski is going to be talking about NAV Licensing 101. So we invite you all to attend that webinar, same time, 10 a.m. Central Time. So everyone have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all for attending. And as always, continue to go to our website to check out the news and events that are going on with Innovia. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Angie.